coming. We're going to talk today about emotions. Now, I know from the questionnaire that you received, you said you were concerned about emotions, as all people are, because it leads to anger. So we're going to discuss, talk about, and look at anger as an emotion. Now the question arises, am I qualified to tell you, to talk to you about this subject? Well, I have almost 19 hours of Christian counseling. I have consumed over 60 videos dealing with personality disorders, of which anger is one of those. And I have read many books, but one of those books seems to stand out. It's called The Lies That We Tell Ourselves. That's written by Dr. Chris Thurman, who is a noted psychologist and prolific author. And he writes in this book a story about a woman who was coming to get her flight, and she had a few moments to kill, and so she goes to the snack bar, gets cookies and a newspaper, sits down and begins reading the newspaper. She's lost, engrossed in what she's reading, and all of a sudden she hears a sound that disturbs her. She lifts over a newspaper, and there is an individual eating cookies. Same kind of package she just purchased. It had to be her cookies. She was incensed. Why would anybody do such a terrible thing as eat another person's cookies? She turned the cookies around immediately, facing her, took a cookie, ducked behind the newspaper, and began reading some more. Well, it wasn't long till she heard the sound again. There, this man had taken the cookies, all of the cookies, and she was about ready to explode and give him a piece of her mind when she heard her flight being called. She immediately got everything together, ran to the ticket counter, opened up her purse, and there in her purse was her unopened package of cookies. Now, what's important about that story is, just before she was going to explode, just before she was going off the deep end, we can say, something interrupted her. That's something Dr. Chris Thurman calls the trigger moment. He says that there is a moment in time, just before you explode, that you have an opportunity to figure out what the problem is, to determine what's causing the issue and what to do about it. He says that you need to look at that moment before you explode, that trigger moment, before you pull the trigger, and you need to ask yourself this question. Is this a nickel moment, or is it a $500 moment? In other words, is this really worth getting upset about? Am I really ready to pull the trigger? Am I really ready to go off on that person? Well, there's others that agree with that subject. Dr. Smarling, another fabulous author, another great psychologist, says, now look, there are these emotions that you're going to encounter. You're going to have them almost every day of your life. Anger is part of that, but, he says, you can't do a lot about anger. It's just going to come up on you. What can you do? But here's what he says. He differentiates between good anger and evil anger. Good anger, he says, is an anger that you get upset with yourself when you leave the gate open, afraid a child or a dog might run out into the street. Dr. Gary Seepsey says in his evaluation that you really become angry when your expectations do not meet reality. Okay? Something you thought should happen didn't happen. It's like you're telling your teenage daughter, clean the room up. I'm going to the mall. When I come back, better be clean. Come back, it's not clean. There's an example of the difference between reality and expectations. Dr. Jeannie Siegel says, look, there are things you can do in that trigger moment, and she agrees wholeheartedly with Dr. Thurman. She says you can take a walk, brisk walk, forget about it. You can count to 10 very slowly, and you can just think about what you are doing. So she agrees. So if all of these people agree that there is a trigger moment, that there's a moment in there when you don't have to go, when you don't have to pull the trigger, when you don't have to go off, when you don't have to get excited, why are people doing that? Well, the reason is simple. Education. The masses have not been told about these answers. You need to educate the people, and you need to start early. I would suggest that you start at the 9th grade, maybe the 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and begin to teach them about that trigger moment, about that time that you have, and that brief expanse of time that you have when you decide, am I going to do it or am I not going to do it? Am I going to become angry or not become angry? Now, when you don't stop anger, it grows and grows and grows, and pretty soon becomes rage. And when people get together that are angry, they become enraged. That leads to social unrest. That leads to violence, and probably into riots. So it's important that you must stop that. So how are you going to do it? How are you? Well, let me ask you a question. If you could do something that would change people's lives, would you do it? And I can tell by the survey that you would. Well, here's what you can do. First thing you can need to do is to read up on anger. The second thing, you can start out by calling your congressman and saying, look, we need to get this education to the masses, and we need to start it in high school or even junior high school. Call up talk radio. You can do that and say, look, I'm making you aware of this problem. Here it is. You have got to stop this anger before it grows into violence. You can also say, Congressman, talk radio. You can go right into newspapers, and you can form groups. And you groups can get together as a powerful agency and go to meetings, school board meetings, and present them with the answer to this problem of anger. Now, here's the question. One more question. Will you do it? Will you make a difference? I'm calling you to action. I'm asking you to change. Change a social agenda. Change people. And you say, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, no problem, because I'm going to give you a handout. And in this handout, you're going to be able to contact congressmen, talk radio, newspapers, school board members. You'll have all the information and resources you need. But let me tell you something for sure, for absolute surety. If you do not do it, if you don't do it, it will not get done.